Equatorial Guinea, a country nestled along the west coast of Africa, part of a continent that faces a huge challenge, that of a burgeoning youth population, the largest on the globe. Currently, over 40% of Africa's population is below 15 years old. 60% of Africa's population is under the age of 24. And the youth unemployment or under-unemployment between the ages of 15 and 24 account for over 20% of the population. If you consider the definition of youth by the African Youth Charter, which sets the age between the ages of 15 and 35, then this percentage exceeds 30%. This is the motivation for the theme of the 17th African Union Summit, Accelerating Youth Empowerment for Sustainable Development. The summit was held at the picturesque Zipopo Conference Center in Malabo, the capital of Equatorial Guinea. Presidents, prime ministers and kings from across the continent came together to attend the summit that was looking at an issue crucial for Africa's success in the future. Everyone was in agreement. Youth development and capacity building go hand in hand. Dr. Frenny Lotier, Executive Secretary of the African Capacity Building Foundation, was invited to attend the summit. And through its 20-year history, ACBF has built strong partnerships with African governments, higher education institutions, civil society, and other in-country and sub-regional development stakeholders. An organization poised to play a pivotal role in assisting African countries to deal with the challenge of youth development and unemployment. A special thematic debate session was held that saw the youth address African Union presidents on the issues they felt strongly about. Among their appeals to the heads of state, they pointed out that the African Youth Charter, though adopted, had only been ratified by 18 countries. Dr. Lotier addressed this session.
9 years ago, you adopted a declaration on the proclamation of Capacity Building Decade in Africa. Many lessons can be drawn with direct implication on the issue of job creation. In the interest of time, I will list only two. First, the macroeconomic environment, which has distinctly improved in many African countries, rendering the continent more resilient to crisis. Think tanks and policy units have played a decisive role in achieving this result. Second, the supply of qualified thinkers, economists, policymakers, and development managers has increased in many countries, enabling Africa to create high-end analysis and policy jobs, translating into a drastic reduction on reliance on foreign technical assistance. Despite these results, efforts should be kept up as many challenges remain. Efforts should especially go to prioritizing capacity in the development process and when budgets are allocated. Developing human and institutional capacity is one of the best investments Africa can make in its search for sustainable economic growth, good governance, and job creation that will eradicate poverty. I hope that you will renew your commitment to capacity development and give your explicit support, leadership, and commitment to implementing recommendations reflected in this address.
Discussions were focused on youth development. Delegations from across the continent came to listen, participate, and suggest solutions to create a proactive youth approach to improving youth unemployment on the continent. And Dr. Lotier had special insights on the issue.
Ma'am, welcome to the program. First question for you is, you are here in Malabo for what purpose?
I'm at the AU Summit to participate in the NEPAD Heads of State meeting and to also be involved in the thematic topics that are covered at this summit. The African Capacity Building Foundation has a strategic memorandum of understanding with the African Union, and we get involved in activities that are of a high priority where capacity is a key issue. And the topics that we are covering at this summit really go at the heart of capacities that countries need, and so we are here for that.
Why is this theme for this year important to ACBF?
Well, the theme of the Heads of State Summit is youth unemployment, and this is one of the most difficult challenges facing the continent. First, because of the number of young people that we have, over 200 million of them, because 60% of the population is under 24 years of age. The second is because we've had a difficult time generating jobs for these young people. For us to generate jobs for the 10 million more that we add every year, Africa would have to grow at 7% for more than 5 years. And not a single country has been able to achieve that high level of growth over that sustained a period of time. So I think the theme of youth employment and the challenge of sustainable economic growth to generate the jobs needed for young people is one of the most difficult topics that we can tackle, and they all have a lot of dependency on capacity, because even the ability to do a job is capacity.
Well, this theme comes really hot on the heels of the Mauritania summit and the outcomes thereof.
Well, in Mauritania, we had a chance to talk to all the North African countries, and we had a number of countries from the south of the Sahara also participating. And the key issues we tackled were, why has it been so difficult to generate jobs for young people? And we found a number of constraints, but also opportunities to improve this situation. First, on the constraints. A lot of young people, when they come out of school, they have book knowledge, and they're not able to actually use that immediately in the workplace. Most of the countries don't have internship programs or apprenticeship programs that give young people a chance to learn. Very few have opportunities for entrepreneurship for young people because of the risk of getting a loan, setting up, starting up, and creating an enterprise. So all those bottlenecks to young people prevent them from actually immediately going into the labor market. But the other constraint is that we have forgotten in our education system to give vocational training, to give people skills that are immediately useful when they come out of university. And that's one of the big constraints that the North African countries are facing, but it's not unique just to them. It's also present in many other countries in the rest of Africa. So these two big challenges appeared as one of the constraints that they are facing. But the third one, which is also not unique to North Africa, has to do more with the ability of companies to attract and retain young people who have skills, who can grow and be able to run or create their own companies when they come out of the labor market. And the fact that most young people, when they come out of school, depend on a job from the public sector. And the public sector is not growing. In Mauritania, they have a freeze on the growth of the public sector. So the opportunity to be employed in the public sector has also declined. Those are some of the lessons we learned. On what can be done to improve the opportunities for young people, there were a number of great ideas that were shared. For example, having a structured apprenticeship program where the government, for example, can support companies giving semi-scholarships, compensating for salaries so that young people can learn, putting together innovation funds that young people can tap into, putting a lot of support for creating your own job, so that people can go and, with creative ideas, start to employ others, including employing themselves. Like, for example, creating a nursery for young children. Since more parents are working when they're quite young, they don't have a place to keep their children, and this is a very simple thing to do if you have the right skills and are able to get certification to create an opportunity to take care of other people's children. Also, you have companies that can be created for consulting that don't require very much to set up. There are countries like Algeria that have offered now subsidies for office space so that 5 or 6 professionals can rent office space together, bringing the cost down and start up a consulting firm and so on. So quite a few excellent examples were shared, and also some of the challenges that were common across countries were shared, and that gave a chance for looking at regional solutions, sub-regional solutions, and other creative ideas around job creation.
Would you say having resources for a country is enough?
Well, in our new strategy, we have a category of support to countries which we classify as resource-rich but capacity-poor. So in every sense of the word, they have no business being poor because they could afford to develop. But they don't have the capabilities, whether it's skills, organizational competencies, or the societal impetus to really move forward. So in those environments, our support to countries focuses on helping them very quickly get, first of all, the competences they need to tap into the value that they have. If it's oil or minerals, having local experts who are able to transform that natural resource into semi-finished or finished products that add value, create jobs, and generate wealth. We also help them think better about what they will do when that natural resource is exploited, to save for the future, whether it's putting in place and managing sovereign wealth funds, whether it's creating opportunities to save for future generations, whether it's investing those resources to get more value even in the short term so that they can benefit when the resources are completely depleted. And finally, to help them use the skills that they would gain during the extraction process, whether it's in construction or mining, and have them used in other sectors. For example, accounting skills are needed across the board. Construction skills, when you build a pipeline, you can have some skills that will be useful to build a building. So how do they use these opportunities to translate and build other sectors of the economy? And finally, what can they do on a regional basis? If your neighbor is not resource rich, but you are, and you have exploited the resource and then they discover oil, then can you create a labor market such that the skills that were developed in one country can be more mobile and used in another country? So these are the kind of things that we look at and help countries think through and put in place the plans, the programs, the skills, the policies they need in order to become capacity rich.
Ma'am, thank you very much. We have to leave it there.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you,
Daniel.
This year marks the 10th anniversary of the new Partnership for Africa's Development, NEPAD. The AU held a special session to celebrate this organization's success. Dr. Ibrahim Mayaki heads up the NEPAD.
Dr. Mayaki, welcome to the program. 10 years on for NEPAD. Talk to us about the way forward.
Just 3 elements of response. The first element is linked to an historical contextualization of NEPAD. NEPAD was designed as a comprehensive development framework which could reduce the marginalization of a continent, not only economically, but at the same time politically. The second element of response is that the main and fundamental message which can be driven from the NEPAD program is that governance is a precondition to development. And the third element of response is about ownership. If you don't own your own development programs, which means if you don't design them taking into account your own interests and the interests of a majority, then you will fail. These 3 elements of response can be evaluated when we look at what has been done in the last 10 years. And what has been done in the last 10 years can be resumed on 2 dimensions. The first one is we provided coherent strategic frameworks for the continent in agriculture, in infrastructure, in health, in education. And the second dimension is that we triggered within the architecture of the African Union a new thinking related to development. And that new thinking is about development effectiveness, not aid effectiveness. The African countries were and are still relying too much on aid. And the figures really show that 80% of our development finance is not linked to aid. So we should stop thinking about relying on aid, and we should concentrate more on development effectiveness.
Well, it sounds, Doctor, that you have laid a very strong foundation.
But what I'm hearing now is there are relationships and partnerships that you are starting, for example, with the African Capacity Building Foundation.
Absolutely. You know, the African Capacity Building Foundation is the main leader of the implementation efforts which are being done in relation to capacity building. And the main advantage of the African Capacity Building Foundation is that it has offices all over Africa, in many countries, nationally. The second advantage is that they have drawn lessons from the limits of capacity building strategies. And all these lessons are focused on one main idea, is that when you want to move from aid effectiveness to development effectiveness, you need to build capacity. So what does capacity building means? It means you need a sound leadership, you need citizen empowerment, you need strong managerial systems, you need strong communication strategies. So you need not only the soft dimension of capacity, which is linked to citizen empowerment and leadership, but you need also the hard part, which are systems, procedures, and norms. So in partnering with the African Capacity Building Foundation, we mainstream a strategic framework of the African Union, which is the Capacity Development Strategic Framework, which is an holistic framework. We mainstream that framework, and at the same time, we build sound support strategies to the countries and the regional economic communities on the basis of what the African Capacity Building Foundation is offering, which is pragmatic systems which improve the performance of national organizations, regional organizations, and the African Union Commission, because ACBF has an MOU also with the African Union Commission.
We have a young continent, Doctor, and I'm sure that's uppermost in your mind when you think of capacity building. You would want to put your thrust towards the youth, correct?
2 out of 3 Africans are under 25. Africa has not finalized its demographic transition. We still have demographic growth rates which are oscillating between 2.8 and 3.2, which means that the cohorts of young people coming on the employment market are really huge. If you take a country like Mali, which is around 15 million inhabitants, it means that every year, you have between 250,000 and 300,000 cohorts of young from between the ages of 18 and 22 coming on the employment market. In a country like Mali, where industrialization is incipient and the public administration cannot absorb more than 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 a year, that means that you have a huge gap. How can you tackle that challenge? You can tackle it if you empower the youth by creating conditions to develop human capital, and if you target key sectors like agriculture. Africa is still a continent with high levels of food insecurity, very young people, and high levels of inequality. If we build human capital systems, formation systems, taking advantage of that youth, we can have the agricultural sector absorb them and then uplift the processes of industrialization, just as it has been done in the north. The industrialization processes in the north were based on agricultural development, which led with the necessary surpluses to a sound industrialization process.
Well, Dr. Mayaki, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thanks to you. Thanks to you.
Dr. Jean Ping is the chairperson of the African Union Commission. He says the issue of the youth development is pivotal to the growth of Africa.
Dr. Ping, welcome to the program. Let's talk about the theme that your organization chose this year and why you think this theme is befitting.
Well, you know that, first of all, we have in mind that theme. But with the revolution in Arab world, which was conducted by youth, you know, it's the young people who bring this revolution in Tunisia, in Egypt, and everywhere. The theme become more valid. We thought that, as this young man said in the room to the head of state, if you don't take care of me, we will take care of you. So this is an important issue. Youth in Africa, young people, represent more than half of the population, 60%, in some cases more than 60%. So you can see that in a world where in Europe, in Asia, population is becoming older and older, the proportion of young is diminishing. You see that in Africa, it's the contrary. The population of young is becoming more and more important. So problems and solutions should be found. The young people need to be educated. They need to be to go to school, to go to find a job, to be in good health. All these things needs investment. You have to invest in schools, you have to invest in hospitals, you have to invest in training, and you have to invest to find job for these young people coming to the market. So you can see that it is crucial for Africa, youth.
I suppose it's easier said than done, is it not, Dr. Ping, to try and educate the youth? Because the thing is, you don't quite get the returns very quickly, do you?
But you see, when you see the MDG, the Millennium Development Goals, you have, for instance, one of the goals says that you should educate youth until the age of 16, 17. It should be compulsory. It should be compulsory. That's one of the objectives of the millennium. Many countries, they say that it is compulsory to educate youth to send them to school until the age of 16, 18, but also the school should be free, which means that you have to pay everything to educate these people. You can imagine that this needs a lot of investment, but the return will be much, much better, because what do you want to invest in? The richest of a country is its population. The rest is important, but the quality of the population is the most important thing. Take the case of Japan. They have nothing, no raw materials, only education, and the people are educated, they have skills, they can work, create, here and there. And Japan was the second strongest economic power in the world.
I hear what you're saying. Are you suggesting that our people are not fully capacitated?
Yes, because you see, first of all, we have the proportion of youth is high. And in many cases, these young are not able to go to school, and they remain uneducated. So this has to be changed. It has to be changed. And there is a need to educate our population, the youth, to send them to school, to build hospital for them. If you have a young man who is sick, it is waste of human resources. So I think that the problem of education is fundamental.
Well, Dr. Ping, thank you very much. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Young people got together in Malabo to discuss lessons learned as well as to contextualize the existing challenges. ILO's Regional Director for Africa, Mr. Charles Dan, gave his perspectives on unemployment on the continent.
This is a huge challenge, but this challenge is even bigger actually in Africa, because we have calculated that in the world around 2,010 million people are unemployed. When we say unemployed, we mean that they don't have a decent, what we call a decent job. And nearly 40% of this population are precisely the young persons. And in Africa, we all know that the main issue that we have is that we have a huge deficit of decent jobs. And every year in Africa, 2.2 million young people are entering into the labor market. What are the opportunities that we do have for them in our countries? The reality is that we all know that young people are not calling for charity. They are calling for productive opportunities. They would like to get access, they would like to get connections, they would like to get social inclusions. So here it's very important to know what we are talking about. For us, we think that when you talk about youth unemployment, people think that there is a problem and that the young people are the problem in Africa. So we should talk about youth employment, because youth employment, when you talk about youth employment, you start realizing that the young are the solutions to Africa's development. But for the youth to become the solution in Africa's development, we'll need to change our policies. We'll need to move from the policies of the past to the policies which would be able to target the needs of our youth.
30-year-old Cynthia Masoom is a successful small-scale farmer from Nigeria. She farms chickens, snails, fish, and vegetables, and has recently become a landowner after purchasing a 25-hectare piece of land just outside Lagos. Cynthia originally studied zoology, and she's also a Goldman Sachs scholar.
Cynthia, welcome to the program. We are in Malabo here in Equatorial Guinea, and the theme for the AU is youth employment and sustainable development. Some would say it means you guys, the youth, are waiting for a job. Are you?
The youth is burning with passion and energy and zeal, and they're waiting to be called upon to engage. They're waiting to be engaged, basically.
First of all, for the benefit of those who are aspiring to be like you, how exactly did you start your own business?
When I finished college, I realized that there was a niche that I could fill. The question I've always asked all my life is, what can I do differently to add value to society? And at the point when I graduated, it was the emergence of quick service restaurants in my country. And I asked the questions, who are they buying their produce from? I mean, the fast food companies would require all sorts of products and items to run their operations. And I got involved, and it was phenomenal, because the lady who was my first client was a lady my father reported me to. She says, my father said I won't take on employment in one of the large corporations, because I had the privilege of doing my internship with ExxonMobil at the time. And he thought, hey, this is like the big break for the family. She's just going to stay on through and rise through the ranks. And I said, no. There's only one thing man can do without on the face of this earth after breathing air, and that is food. And I'm going to position myself in that industry and make a difference. We can do without clothes, we can do without a new car, we can do without all the luxuries, but we can't survive without food. So who is producing the food? That was the question I asked myself, and I decided to stay there. And what that has done for me is that it has not only empowered me, it has helped me to empower other people, because I supply QSRs in my country. I also recruit people to work for me, and my business has become multifaceted. I not only run a farm or an agro-processing business, I also have evolved into training other people to see the opportunities that are available within the agribusiness sector, because it's a huge value chain. Typically, what we think about when we hear agriculture is farming with a cutlass and a hoe. But the truth is that there's a huge value chain where people, especially young people, can position themselves strategically. We start from production, planting the seeds, and all of that, and we move to processing, we move to packaging, we move to distribution. Between the packaging and the distribution network, there's logistics, cold storage facilities, and you will engage engineers in that point, you will engage mechanics, you will engage the plumbers on the farm. I mean, the opportunities are enormous, and for me, it's become my responsibility to help young people on the continent see how they can align and position themselves within this sector.
How many people do you employ?
Currently, I have 5 permanent staff on my payroll, but we have a revolving pool of contract staff who come to work with us from time to time when we need to clear land on the farm, when we need to package and we need extra hands. And this is a strategy for my business because I cannot afford to pay all the people I require to work for me. So one of the models we've adopted is to bring in contract staff when we do require them.
Just in ending, Cynthia, a message to the youth.
I would say to the average young person out there to believe in themselves, believe in their dreams, and keep it alive. Because there is one thing peculiar to us as Africans. There is nothing the African child cannot do. We face harsh, intimidating challenges, but each and every day what we need to do is tell ourselves we can overcome these challenges. That is the true African spirit. Nothing can kill the tenacity that we carry. A lot of people look for that, and we have it naturally. And I think we should transform that into creating wealth for ourselves. We should go beyond complaining and do something. The time for change is now, where the future that Africa seeks, when people say we are the future is now. And if the government will not prepare the future for us, the least we can do for ourselves is prepare ourselves for the future. Because today we're young, in a couple of months or years, we will no longer be young, we will be adults. I mean, we will be grown-ups. And there's a generation coming behind us. We need to prepare the future for that generation behind us, because a lot of the growth on the continent depends solely on the young people today.
Cynthia, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Dan.
Nairobi is home to a company called Zege Technologies, an IT company founded by 27-year-old Karaoke Gatito. He has 4 partners and they've developed a new mobile payment solution.
Karaoke, welcome to the program. Talk to me on your thoughts when you read the theme of the AU this year, which is youth employment and sustainable development.
The youth are a force. We are very passionate, we are very zealous about a lot of things. And we are in a place where Africa is turning. The youth are taking initiative more and more. Youth empowerment and development and acceleration for development is something that I think needs to be taken actively. You see, there is one thing that Africa has, and that is problems. And from my perspective, I think that problems are not just challenges but opportunities. When you go and see something is not working, what do? Do you go and complain and say the sky is falling? Or do you say, hey, are we going to stop the sky from falling, or what are we going to do when the sky falls? And so the young people need to look into our challenges and come up with great innovative ideas to overcome those things. And more often than not, you'd find that somebody who is overcoming a problem will automatically and without their own knowledge or even effort create employment and create opportunity for that. So young people need to think outside the box, outside what we already know as what is Africa. And we need to think that we can do it. Think that we do not need people from foreign lands to come and tell us, oh, this is the right way to do, or we can create ourselves. And even if we do those, even if we do need that kind of input, then we need to take charge of the process in order to make our progress sustainable and own it ourselves. In terms of empowerment and acceleration, the mindset of Africans, and I don't know if it's only my country, but I don't know if it is sustainable enough to expect employment after you finish school. Yes, you finish school, you go get masters. These days, having a master's degree in my country is not competition. You have to have more than a master's. You have to do, let's say you're a financial accountant, you have done your bachelor's, you have CPA, which is an accounting diploma, certified public accounting, then you have to have masters, and that is what keeps you competitive. Africa-wide, I don't think this can be sustainable. What we need to do is to tell our children, okay, I have lived this way, and I have had to contend with this, this, and this, and you have had to do it, but now you have a chance to change it.
Talk to me about the how you started your business.
There's a problem in the Kenyan market whereby mobile money was not being accepted by businesses very easily because this is something that came up and just blew up in the Kenyan space. And so we found that real-time transactions were a bother and integration into systems were a bother. It was a real pain for businesses to manage mobile money, and that's where we came in and built this system that does that for companies who want to accept mobile money by citizens and customers. And really it made sense because there are 20 million mobile money users in the country, in Kenya, which because it's a consumer-driven need, they have to comply. So that's what the opportunity that brought itself, the problem and the opportunity that brought up my involvement in Zagia Technologies.
For those who are watching us, a lot of youth like you, what would be the message to them?
My message to the youth who probably have done some level of education is don't wait for people to help you. Even from my perspective as a businessman, I come across people who have these great ideas, I want to do this and I do that, but sometimes it's not feasible for me to support them because there are other things that I need to do. So as a young person, just start. Effort is really recognized, and for me this is where I started. I did not have anything. I did not have any funding or sources of people to tell me, go ahead, do it. But I decided, looked at the market, decided that this is a need, I'm going to do it. And the reason why I'm doing it is because there's a huger need, which is youth employment, and it solves a huge problem in the market. So if you have an idea, run it by people, and then once you decide to go for it, just go for it. Even if your idea is not the right one, you'll find the right idea with motivation. As long as people see that you are moving ahead, then they will see this is a serious person who wants progress for themselves, progress for their community, and they will move. And you'll find help along the way.
Karaoke, thank you very much.
Welcome. You're welcome.
The power of the youth was clearly seen in North African politics a few months ago. In Egypt, thousands of youths went to the streets to protest against the country's leadership. After a long standoff between unarmed youths and police, President Mubarak stepped down. Dr. Amani Asfour, president of Business and Professional Women's Association in Egypt, says this shows the true power of young African people.
Dr. Asfour, welcome to the program. We meet in Malabo as the AU Summit is underway, and the theme this year is youth employment and sustainable development. Of course, I'm sure you know a thing or two about that, considering the youth in Egypt led the revolution. What do you think really caused that revolution?
Well, actually, this summit is really about youth employment and sustainable development. And I believe that this was the real cause of the revolution in Egypt. Revolution, or the uprising in Egypt, was actually all around the youth started. But let me tell you something else. Last summit in Kampala, when there was this bomb, it was by the youth, Al-Shabaab in Somalia. Al-Shabaab in Arabic means youth. And we were all anticipating that the youth are going to be the real driver of change in all the African continent. Primarily because they have no hope, no voice, their voice is not heard, no social justice. They have no political participation or economic participation. They are full of energy, full of power, but they cannot know where to put their energy in. How can they be part of the economy? They are graduates or illiterates, but they have no real participation. So the whole issue led by Egyptians, youth, young girls and young boys everywhere, started because of the unemployment, the poverty, no social justice, no democratic participation. It's all about that. So actually, and we all anticipated this. This is a real change. In Egypt, there was a GDP increase in the GDP, economic growth, but it was not reflected on the majority of the population.
I suppose you will say then the theme is very timely.
Very, very timely. And actually, even this summit, we had this meeting about youth and sustainable development because we said that there can never be any sustainable development in Africa unless we invest in our human resources, and this includes youth and women. More than 70% of our African continent are youth. We don't really invest in them. We think they are still coming in the next future, but they are the real present of the continent. And this continent will never develop unless we invest in our youth and we invest in their brains. What I mean is that the African brains and our youth is the most important asset we have in Africa. We are more than 1 billion in Africa. Some people think that overpopulation is a curse. No, it's at all. If it is really invested to be productive, then we could be the best continent on earth.
Listening to you, Doc, what you're saying right now, it sounds to me like you're talking about building capacity with the youth.
Very true, very true. How to build the capacity of our youth to be able to lead, to be able to have a share in the economic growth, to be able Africa is the richest continent on earth, and I always say that, but yet it's the poorest of them all. We have all the resources of the world. We have all the natural resources and we have all the human resources. How can we build the capacity of our human resources to be able to manufacture our food, industrialize our raw materials, have all the industrialization, the infrastructure, the energy, all what we are talking about the utopia of Africa can never be done except we build the capacity of our people, especially our youth and women, to be able to do that.
But just exactly how do you build that capacity?
It's a very important, because I believe that building the capacity of our people comes in actually under 3 pillars, and I call them the triad of empowerment. How we empower the personality of our people to be able to lead an enterprise, to start their company. This comes through training, building capacity, education. How can we really change the mindset of the people that we African are very proud to be African, we can change the world. Those youth are our real driver of growth. And economic growth is very, very crucial, based on social justice, rule of law and democracy. Those 3 components can never be separated from each other. So building capacity of our youth to be able to share in the political participation, to be share in the economic growth, to really have a say. And this is very important. So how to empower the personality of our African youth to be able to do that. And this comes by training and building the capacity. But that also comes in partnership with the third pillar. The second P is the policy and the procedures. How can we lobby and advocate our governments to mainstream this in the legislation, to have an infrastructure of laws which really empower our youth? How can we get, I mean, all the decision-making positions are not for youth. There are no monitoring for our youth. There is no engaging of our youth in our political participation, no engagement of youth in SMEs. And this is the real issue, because all the economy within all our African countries, especially also was in Egypt, were the big elite people, those who already made it and already empowered.
Well, Dr. Aspo, thank you very much. We have to leave it there.
My pleasure.
Mr. Abdoulaye Janneh is the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, UNECA. He says the ACBF plays an important role in addressing the future of Africa's youth.
Mr. Janneh, welcome to the program. Those at the African Union believe this year's theme is very important, especially considering of what is sweeping across North Africa and the Arab world. Do you agree with them?
I think it is important, Daniel. It's if you look at the population of this continent, which is 1 billion now and would increase more, the significant proportion of it as of now is of youth is very high. We're talking of close to 60% or more, and over now and against 2050, it will still be a very high proportion. So if you really look at this as our biggest asset, our challenge is how do we use this asset and transform it so that they participate meaningfully in the development of this continent, as I said.
But what is it that you really need to make sure that you use the youth optimally?
Well, I think you must empower them. You must give them a voice so that you know what their aspirations are, what they want to do. But you must also train them. You must educate them. You must train them, so that again you give them the tools necessary to participate in meaningful socio-economic development. Encourage them. Youth, the young, are full of energy, dynamism, innovation. So you want to bring this out from them. If you do not do that, of course, it's at your own peril. Because we've seen what's happened in North Africa, where the youth got mad, and they have started a revolution in 2 countries where just a couple of years ago, a year ago, this would have been unthinkable. So they're a strong force. It's a strong force for transformation, and we want to have the strategies to be able to channel this tremendous force into purposeful activities.
Well, after listening to most of the youth who have been at this conference, one really gets the sense that they are ready to engage the African leadership. But my question to you, and maybe to institutions like yours, are you ready to engage the African youth?
I think it varies from country to country. But first, the realization that the youth cannot be ignored and cannot be marginalized. I think it's that awareness is almost in every country. We had, a couple of years ago, an African Development Forum on youth. We had 1,000 participants in there, and it's out of that the Youth Charter the African Youth Charter was born. So the consciousness for African countries, of peoples of Africa to deal with the youth, I think is there. It's not very recent, but it's there, and now it is really finding strategies, ways and means of empowering them and giving them voice in this process. So we do not decide for them what is it that they could do, but we do it consensually with them. And I think that's the message we are also getting today from most people, from the youth themselves. You heard them. They were very, very vocal. They were very clear in their minds what is it that they want, and their willingness to really not to surrender. And they're saying, this is our continent. You have to develop this continent with us. you know what I mean, in that, you know, let's form a coalition to move the agenda.
Well, after listening to what most of the young people at this conference have said, it sounds like they are geared and ready to engage the African leadership. Do you think the African leadership and maybe institutions like yours are ready to also engage them?
I think the African leadership is very much aware of this issue. I think they are ready in the sense that they have started engaging the youth. They've started looking at the appropriate strategies to be able to meet their aspirations. Today, when we listened to heads of state, there are 30 of them there, 25 of them wanted to speak. They wanted to speak, not only addressing the issue in a generic manner, but saying concretely what they are doing in their individual countries. And I think this is a strong message to the youth, to say we are in this together, we are aware of your concerns, your aspirations, and we want to work with you to find optimal solutions. So I think it's there. It is happening. It's the pace as fast as the youth will want to, but it is nice to be young. We are impatient. And I think we will work with them, you know, all of us, our institutions, our governments, and so on, so that we have a roadmap which is acceptable to all of us.
Well, he is hoping that the youth does have that kind of patience. We have to leave it there, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Some of the resolutions adopted at the AU summit in Malabo included that all member countries should advance the youth agenda and adopt policies and mechanisms towards the creation of safe, decent, and competitive employment opportunities. The African Union Commission, in collaboration with its partners, should establish a technical and vocational education and training framework addressing specifically agriculture and ICTs, and that member states should provide to the AU Commission adequate resources for the advancement of the youth agenda, including the funding of the Pan-African Youth Union. All this to ensure that the future of these young people will be better and brighter tomorrow.
The voice of the youth from Malabo is very strong and clear. They are demanding a stake in deciding their own futures. However, for that to happen, they will need to be fully capacitated. And it looks like the African leadership is listening. For Eye on Africa, I am Daniel Makokera. Goodbye.
Follow up all government projects and every quarter we report on the level of implementation. In fact, this at the end of the day goes to cabinet and the ministers are accountable to delayed implementation of the projects. So that has had a big impact in terms of implementation of our project, and so we think maybe it might be the same case across the region, or we can share our experience with with the other partner countries. But I think the best way is really to have private sector investment in the PPP arrangement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. I would want to thank the audience for contributing, and I would also want to thank the panelists, the ministers, business people, and the EAC, and of course those with the money, AFDB and EADB. Thank you very much for the discussion. I hope we got something, and I also hope we created food for thought on how to move forward. And I think at times some people say, well, it's better maybe for government just to create the enabling environment and let those who are in business do what they know best to doing. But then again, way back, the Western world said government intervention was wrong, but after the financial downturn, we see that they are also in it. We have to leave it there. Thank you very much, ministers and business people. That's where we leave it for this program from Kigali, Rwanda, as we follow the official launch of the EADB operations in Rwanda. Until next time, goodbye and good night.